Gosh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be part of the CMX Summit. And I'm super inspired by the work that you guys do to bring more humanism to your online communities. My name is Emiliana Simon-Thomas, and I'm the Science Director at the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. And my work involves studying how our social connections, our predilection towards kindness and generosity, and our sense of belonging or investment in our communities relates to our overall well-being. What it boils down to when we look scientifically at well-being and who falls into the category of what you might call very happy is that social relationships are instrumental. People who are very happy always have them. There's the second quote describes something called the social baseline theory, which basically says that evolutionarily our bodies, our nervous systems expect to have access to social relationships, and when we don't have that, we experience what is described in the third quote, loneliness, which is associated with risks to health and well-being that surpass other major public health challenges that we face. So one of the key roles that I play at the Greater Good Science Center is I am a co-instructor for a massive open online course, a MOOC, called The Science of Happiness. And basically, we did a little bit of a bait and switch, because a lot of people think that happiness is something they want and they know what it means and they aspire to it, but a lot of people have a little bit of a incorrect idea about where happiness comes from. So we say, come on in, learn about happiness, and then we say, guess what? Your happiness doesn't come from the things you might have thought it does. It comes from the, again, strength and authenticity of your social connections, your general capacity to be a positive person, to experience positivity, and how resilient you are, and that is how well you handle the difficulties in life. Many people think that happiness is about that kind of one person we all know who's like permanently enthusiastic and joyful and comedic and clownish and all those things, and at some point that can be kind of feel inauthentic or even irritating. We're actually equipped to experience difficult moments in life and to relate to them with emotions like sadness and anger. When we experience sadness, we express something that makes other people come close to us and support us. That's an important piece of happiness. So happiness doesn't mean always being in joy or always being hyper-optimistic and enthusiastic. We try to dispel a few myths in our course, and one I already alluded to, the idea that relentless pursuit of the bigger bonus is a way to get happy, or accumulating the lion's share of material resources is what's going to make you happy. There's a large body of evidence showing that income and happiness aren't correlated in a systematic linear fashion. Sure, we need to feel safe, okay? And this is going to bring me back to the title of this talk, right? How to make safe, engaged communities. We need to feel safe. So once you have enough income that your life is safe, you know where the food is, you can be warm, going substantially beyond that doesn't lead to increases in happiness. If you can't read it, it says I should have bought more crap on his deathbed. There's a couple mental habits that we get into that also create challenges to the pursuit of happiness, particularly in the sphere of thinking about happiness as a socially driven phenomenon. I'm very, very happy, but I want to be very, 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 very happy, and that's why I'm miserable. And so what that's depicting is, one, our tendency to be perfectionist, right? To always try to get the most out of everything all the time and to do everything perfectly right and not to do things unless we know for sure they're going to turn out that way. This is really not good for happiness. This is really not a good way to establish your own personal sense of safety in the world. Social comparison, right? A real specifically big problem in online communities where our perfectionist inclinations drive us to post the I'm on a boat things all the time, which make other people think that they're inadequate, and so on and so on. So in some ways, the culture of online communities has been a little bit challenging in this sphere of creating a safe place for people to bring their whole selves to the arena. So I want to share some of the key findings that we hinge upon, and sorry that my slides aren't as comedic or entertaining as the previous speakers, but hopefully you'll learn something. David Rand at Yale has been for a long time trying to figure out the answer to the question, are human beings kind of inherently kind of selfish and conniving and exploitative, and it's kind of culture and our parenting and our life experience that makes us generous and kind and cooperative, or is it the flip? And what you're looking at here is evidence that when people are given a chance to contribute to a common resource that will, in an ambiguous or undefined way, will multiply and then be redistributed back to them and everybody else who's been invited into this game, if they're asked to make that decision quickly, they give more. If they're asked to make that decision over a longer period of time, which allows them to kind of deliberate and reflect on it, they give less. And so over 45 plus publications about this very paradigm, Rand's group has come to the conclusion that human beings are intrinsically generous and cooperative. That's the innate inclination, and that being self-interested, being conniving takes more work. Other researchers who look at brain activation have shown that when people make more selfish decisions in games like these, they activate selectively the prefrontal cortex, which is really important for that kind of higher order thinking and deliberation. If you use a fluctuating magnet and put it close to the scalp so it kind of shuts down the prefrontal cortex, people act more generously and cooperatively. So once again, we make the case that our core is to be kind and generous. When we're put in situations that are not safe, we refrain from engaging. So this is why it's so important to think about how to make our online communities as safe feeling as we can. This is another kind of widening the lens body of research spearheaded by Elizabeth Dunn, which shows basically everywhere that she's looked in the world, when she looks at the ratio, or her group looks at the ratio of how much people spend on others, which is called pro-social spending, to how much they spend on themselves, that ratio, the magnitude of that ratio predicts national well-being metrics, okay? That positive relationship is green in every place they looked, save a few places where safety is not an assumption, right? If you're looking at the couple regions where you see pink or red where that doesn't hold, those are places where life is just intrinsically not safe, and you can't expect the same kind of relationship between pro-social orientation and national metrics of well-being. These are data from our students. So over the past 3 years, we've had more than 400,000 people sign up for our Science of Happiness course on edX all over the world. We ask them about themselves, and we ask them to nominate a friend to tell us about them. And so on the left, you're looking at a plot which basically shows you the relationship between how our student got rated and the quality of the relationship that the friend assigned to their friendship. And what you see in green is the line that represents pro-social characteristics. So pro-social characteristics are kindness, generosity, forgiveness, gratitude, these sorts of attributes that are positive but also invested in the welfare of others. Being simply positive is not quite as powerful a way to promise that your friendships are going to be rated as exceptional as opposed to good or very good. And obviously having high ratings on antisocial qualities like irritable or argumentative doesn't bode well for the quality of your relationships. On the right, we're looking at the relationship between each student's score on a metric, a validated psychological survey that provides a score of well-being. So we have happiness, well-being, gratitude, and then stress and loneliness. And what you see is a stepwise increase in the rated quality of the relationship predicting the magnitude of the well-being of each individual. So it's interesting for us to have these metrics that aren't simply self-report, but are a combination of one's own sort of gauge of their own life, plus what another person spontaneously says about them. And at the end of the day, seems like having good relationships comes from being a nice person, being somebody who is pro-social, and being that kind of person leads you to improved well-being. So what does this have to do with online communities or work in the real world? I've had the pleasure of working with Facebook for about 4.5, coming on 5 years now, to try to help them figure out how to create experiences in their user base, or in their people on Facebook, I'm defying one of their first rules, that are socially intelligent, that are pro-social. And the first thing they asked me about was, we don't know how to handle it when people come across a picture they don't like that someone else posted that we can't take down. Okay, so here's me looking particularly a particularly unflattering picture that my dear friend Erin posted. And originally, years ago, if I didn't like that, I would have an option of reporting it to Facebook. Facebook would have some cadre of young people looking through all these reported photos, and they would go, well, this one doesn't have any problem. It doesn't defy our community standards, so it stays up. I feel sort of neglected and ignored. My friend Erin doesn't learn anything about me or doesn't even know this happened, and so there's no learning, there's no increase or potential for growth or trust. So what we did was, over the course of multiple meetings, we convinced them to try to get people to talk to each other. So when I say report to Facebook, I'm asked what's going on. There's several options. One of them is, I don't think this should be on Facebook. After that, there are other options that provide examples and specific explanations. In this case, the one I chose is, I don't want this to be on, this is a picture of my family, and I don't want it on Facebook. I could have chosen, I don't like how I look, this is embarrassing. At the end of the day, I'm given options for what to do, how to resolve this problem, and one of those suggestions is to send a message to Erin. And when that pops up, there's a pre-fabricated message that says, hey, Erin, this picture is kind of private, it's of my family, I don't really want it on Facebook, would you please take it down? Guess what? Erin goes, oh, of course, geez, sorry, and he feels good about me, I feel good about him, we've learned from each other, and Facebook doesn't have to play police, right? Doesn't have to adopt that role. So we've done this in a lot of other contexts with Facebook. We have provided them with Darwin's original descriptions of human emotions and said, hey, you got to put these into your emoticons or your stickers so that people have a more facile way to communicate the richness of their emotional lives. Now we have stickers that represent lots of different emotional states and create this social norm of emotional awareness and social communication. We've also worked with teams that are trying to support people in bullying situations or help people manage their difficulties related to breaking up in relationships, people managing, either facing or coping with the death of a loved one, in particular how to manage their account in the wake of that moment, and also to encourage a rich and diverse variety of expression rather than the celebratory white wine vacation achievement, I'm the best posting that tends to happen in the design that's there. One of my favorite celebrated sort of products that we were able to work with them on is in your news feed now, instead of seeing only a like button, so that all people want to post are things that people would like, right? Which again creates that perfectionist social comparison culture. Now you can say, wow, that really makes me sad if somebody posts something that has to do with a death or a difficult moment, or I love you, I care about you, I want to be here as a person that you consider as a support person. You can laugh, you can be surprised or angry. And again, the idea is to really broaden the scope of emotional authenticity and communication on this virtual product. So how do you do it? I've kind of explained what we did, talked about the principles behind it, but how do you actually do it in your own context? How can you make your community one that actually sort of lives and walks by these sort of pro-social qualities? I'm drawing from the work of Kim Cameron at the University of Michigan, who focuses on compassion, which in many ways is kind of the quintessential or prototypical pro-social characteristic. It's kind of a hard one. You know, a lot of people have different ideas about compassion. But basically, in order for a community to have a value that is entrenched and the assumption for how people engage and interact in that community, it has to be legitimized, which means the leadership has to kind of model it and discuss it openly, and it has to perpetuate across all the people in that community, meaning, again, it has to be kind of the social norm, the expectation that compassion or kindness or gratitude, which is actually a kind of easy one if you're looking for somewhere to start. If you bring these into your day in and day out experiences, people rally around them, and it sort of opens an opportunity that other cultural forces seem to sometimes get in the way with. You can't wait for this just to happen on its own, so this is what if we don't change at all and something magical just happens. It may be that younger generations come in and have different ideas and can transform culture, but if you want to do it now, it has to be an active process. You can't just tell your community members, hey, here's a wellness program, you do it, we'll give you money if you do it. This has to be sort of interactive and reciprocal. Leadership has to be involved and has to demonstrate and model it, has to actually compliment and notice people who are engaged and representing this pro-social approach. And then finally, despite probably most people's ideas, my own included, paying people to be nice doesn't work. It just doesn't work. If you're paying people because they got the most gratitude badges on the app that you're using for your organization, that is not going to encourage them or build their intrinsic motivation towards gratitude. That comes naturally, and you can't pay for it. There are much better ways to incentivize people to sort of take on these qualities. The easiest one is really to help people connect with their core values. So I think that there are some little stickers on the chairs if you came back. Maybe you're sitting on one, or you can grab the one next to you. Should be some kind of cool, charming. Well, actually, why don't I ask you, who's got one? Tell me what's your word? Happy. What's your word? Empathy. Any others? Yeah? Integrity. Peaceful. Okay, so one more. Dedication. So these all sound like values that most of us, you know, put out of any particularly competitive context would espouse as important in our lives. And just looking at them, just having them there, just making them something that's prevalent and expected is part of creating a norm for these values to characterize the dynamics of a particular community. I'm showing you a figure, or it's not from that study, but that can exemplify a classic social psychology study done in 1979, where the researchers basically spied on kids who were trick-or-treating with the unguarded bowl of candy. And in some cases, there was a mirror, so the kids saw themselves, and sometimes there wasn't. When there's a mirror, kids don't take handfuls. They take one or two. When a person does come out and say, hey, what's your name? Kids take just one or two, as opposed to if they're allowed to be fully in disguise and not more anonymous. So really, when people are made to feel like a present human being in the community that you're in that has an identity, they're more likely to behave in a manner that is consistent with these intrinsic and innate pro-social values and inclinations. In the terms of leadership or design or product features, to the extent that they model a kind of emotional self-awareness and an authenticity and a breadth of emotional possibility, that's of benefit to the community. Public acknowledgement of pro-social behaviors is more effective than paying people money. This, again, is the work of David Rand. So saying, hey, thanks so much to Joe, who worked so hard to help us all, pull this event off, even though there were lots of unexpected challenges. That kind of noticing and acknowledgement is a very powerful way to get Joe to then realize that this is something he wants to continue or move forward with as he continues to engage with the community. Other key ways to try to create the norm of pro-social culture in a community, sort of make it the habit, right? Our habits happen as a result of lifelong experience where we see one thing and associate it with another and then assume that things will always work that way. But they're not fixed in stone, right? We know that the nervous system has a lot of malleability, right? Neuroplasticity is a clear and evident reality of our biology. And we can create experiences that shift associations so that people realize that, oh, these kindness metrics work better than perhaps the more hostile possibilities that are out there. So how do you make it automatic? You sort of frame your organization as having pro-social intentions. We're going to be kind. We're going to be compassionate. When something goes wrong, we're going to help. Like, we're pre-decide. Right? We don't wait and sort of think about it and do a rational cost-benefit analysis. We just know that as a community, what matters to us is being generous, is trying to cooperate, trying to acknowledge conflict. Okay, I'm not in like the happy-go-lucky, there is no conflict world. Communities will and always do have conflict. The trick is, how do you reconcile them quickly? How do you teach people how to apologize and forgive one another? Because there's also great scientific literature showing how beneficial and advantageous it is for one to apologize and the other to forgive in the wake of serious conflict. Pre-choosing kindness, right? When I go to the bar, I'm going to order the IPA. That's my favorite. It's what makes me feel good and what I enjoy. I don't have to go there and look at the menu and think about it a lot. I just pre-choose it. That's what happens. Same goes for when somebody asks me for help. I'm going to say yes. I say yes because that's what our culture does. That's what our community does. So those are some of the key ways that I work with organizations when I do to try to help them scaffold a culture, a community of kindness, which again will create the feelings of safety that are required for engagement. If somebody doesn't feel safe, they're not going to engage. We know that both in terms of the speakers that we've heard earlier today, but also neurophysiologically. The very same circuits that are most involved when we're in periods of safety, relaxing, are the same circuits that are critically important for affiliation and approaching others in a socially benevolent way. So safety and engagement are inextricably tied. If you want to know more about this, there are many, many, many articles about the key themes that I've addressed on our Greater Good Science Center website. If you want 8 weeks of me in 4-minute videos, you can register for the course. And if you really want just quick key descriptions of what can I do tomorrow, what kind of practice could I do to kind of bring these ideas into awareness, to prime the values that you have on your little stickers, you can go to Greater Good in Action and see all those resources. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.